The return. The evening sky was painted with soft orange clouds when Sandra drove down the old coastal road. The same road where years ago she had stood beside Keanu, watching the sea crash against the rocks. She had told herself she would never come back here. But time, as always, had its quiet ways of calling people back to where everything started. Her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel as she looked at the horizon, trying to calm the storm of memories rising in her chest. The road was almost empty. Only the distant sound of waves filled the silence. Every turn seemed to whisper something familiar, something half-forgotten. She had left this place to escape the ghosts of what could have been. But tonight, after all these years, something told her she needed to return. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the letter she received last week. Unsigned, written in neat handwriting she recognized instantly. Come to where it began. Just that one line, nothing more. Her heart had raced when she read it. She had kept that letter on her nightstand for days, staring at it before sleeping, wondering if it was real. She thought of burning it, but curiosity had already built its home inside her mind. Now, as she approached the cliffside, she realized that every question she had tried to bury was beginning to rise again. She parked near the old Lighthouse, the same place they used to visit after his long film shoots. When the world outside their little circle didn't matter, the sea breeze touched her face, bringing with it the scent of salt and rain. She stepped out of the car slowly, her coat brushing against her legs. The last rays of the sun glowed against the waves, and for a moment she felt like time had stopped. She closed her eyes, remembering the sound of his laughter, the way he always listened before he spoke, the calmness in his eyes when everything else felt chaotic. Keanu had always carried silence like a gift, a silence that made people feel seen without words, but silence had also broken them. Back then, life had thrown them into different worlds. Careers, choices, and 1,000 unspoken things had pushed them apart. There was no fight, no goodbye, just distance that slowly turned into years. She had watched him from afar, sometimes in interviews, sometimes in films, and every time she saw that quiet strength, she wondered if he ever thought of her too. She told herself he didn't. It was easier that way. A gust of wind brushed through her hair, and she turned toward the lighthouse gate. The metal was cold, covered in rust, yet the lock was gone. Someone had opened it recently. Her heartbeat grew faster. She hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The wooden path creaked under her shoes as she climbed toward the top. With every step, her breath grew heavier, not from fear, but from the weight of everything unsaid. At the top, she stopped. He was standing there. Keanu, in a dark coat, his hair longer, streaked with gray, his eyes still calm yet shadowed with years. He didn't move at first, just looked at her like someone seeing a memory take shape. The world seemed to pause between them. All the noise of the sea faded into a hum. She wanted to speak, but her throat tightened and the words vanished. Instead, she just stood there, feeling both the distance and the closeness of that moment. "You came," he finally said, his voice quiet, almost carried away by the wind. She nodded. "You asked me to?" He smiled faintly. "I wasn't sure you would." She looked around, her eyes catching the old bench near the railing where they once sat watching the sunrise. "It hasn't changed," she whispered. "Some things don't," he replied, his gaze drifting to the ocean. "But some things should have." His tone carried something unspoken, regret, maybe pain. She couldn't tell. The light from the sunset hit his face, showing the tired lines that hadn't been there before. Time had changed him, but it hadn't erased the gentleness she always remembered. That same quiet strength that once made her feel safe now made her feel something she couldn't name. She took a step closer. "Why now, Keanu? After all this time?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took out a small folded paper from his pocket and placed it on the railing between them. "Because you deserve to know the truth," he said. "And because it's time." She looked at the paper but didn't reach for it. "What truth?" He met her eyes. "The one I should have told you years ago." The sound of thunder rolled faintly in the distance. The air smelled of rain. He turned slightly, looking at the horizon. "You remember the night before I left?" he asked. She did. too well. The silence, the phone that rang and went unanswered, the message she never received. That night had lived in her like a wound that refused to close. She nodded slowly. You disappeared. No call, no explanation. You just left. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, she saw the flicker of guilt behind his calm. I didn't disappear, he said softly. I was sent away, her brows furrowed. Sent away? What do you mean? Someone wanted us apart, he replied, and I let it happen. A flash of lightning illuminated the sea, casting silver light on their faces. She stared at him, trying to understand. Who would do that? She whispered. He took a deep breath. Someone close to you. Someone who believed they were protecting you. Her heart began to race. She thought of the few people she trusted back then. Her manager, her assistant, her closest friend. Her voice trembled when she spoke. Who, Keanu? He didn't answer. Instead, he handed her the folded paper. Read it, he said. It'll tell you everything. She hesitated, her fingers brushing the paper as the wind tried to snatch it away. The first drops of rain began to fall. The sky darkened, and the lighthouse light flickered on, bathing them in pale gold. She opened the paper slowly. The handwriting was familiar. Her breath caught. It was written by someone she never expected. Before she could finish reading, the wind tore part of the paper from her hands, sending it flying toward the cliffs. She gasped and ran after it, but the wet ground slipped under her feet. She stumbled, catching the railing just in time. Keanu rushed forward, grabbing her arm to steady her. His grip was firm, his eyes full of fear. For a second, they were close enough to feel each other's breath. The rain soaked through their clothes, but neither moved. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. Was it true? What it said? His eyes lowered. Yes. She froze, the sound of the sea roaring below them. Then everything we believed, it was built on a lie? He nodded slowly, and someone wanted to keep it that way. The thunder grew louder, echoing through the cliffs. He let go of her arm gently and stepped back. That's why I came back, he said. To end it. Her mind spun with questions. End what, Keanu? He looked at her one last time, his expression heavy with something final. The lie that kept us apart. And before she could speak again, he turned toward the stairs and started walking down into the rain. She called his name, but the wind swallowed her voice. The paper she had tried to save lay torn at her feet, the ink bleeding into the wet wood. Only one line was still visible, written in trembling letters. He never left you by choice. The waves crashed harder below, as if the sea itself knew the weight of what she had just read. And in that moment, Sandra realized that the truth she had been running from all these years was only beginning to reveal itself. The letter and the lie the rain kept falling through the night, soft at first, then heavy until the lighthouse disappeared behind a curtain of gray. Sandra sat inside her car, drenched, trembling, staring at the torn piece of paper she had managed to keep. The words "he never left you by choice" echoed again and again inside her mind, each time cutting deeper. Her heart was beating fast, her breath uneven. It felt like the past had suddenly reopened a wound she had spent years trying to forget. She turned on the car light and unfolded the wet paper. Half the page was missing, but the ink on the rest was still legible. The handwriting belonged to her old manager, Claire. Claire had been with her since the early years, guiding her career, protecting her from every rumor and distraction. She had trusted her like family. But now the letter told another story. The lines were short, written in a hurry, but each one was sharp enough to pierce through the years. You will hate me when you read this. I made a choice I thought would save you. He was never supposed to know. I did it to protect your career. Please forgive me. Sandra dropped the paper on the passenger seat, her throat tightening. Outside, lightning flashed over the sea, turning everything white for a moment. She leaned her head against the steering wheel, her tears mixing with the rain on her face. The betrayal felt too heavy to process. Claire wasn't just her manager. She had been her closest friend. The woman who held her when her mother died, who sat with her through sleepless nights before premieres, who told her that love was dangerous for someone always in the public eye. Keanu's words came back to her. Someone close to you. Someone who believed they were protecting you. She realized he hadn't wanted to name Claire. He had wanted her to see it herself. She stayed there for a long time, listening to the sound of rain hitting the windshield. She thought of all the messages that never reached her, the calls that went unanswered, the months of silence that became years. If Claire had really kept them apart, then everything she had believed was a lie. Her anger started to grow beneath the sadness, slow and steady like fire under ashes. By the time the storm began to fade, she made a decision. She started the car and drove back toward the city. The night roads were empty, wet and silent. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, her reflection flickering in the glass as streetlights passed. She wasn't sure what she would say to Claire, but she knew she couldn't stay silent anymore. By dawn, the city lights appeared in the distance, blurry through the fog. Sandra's eyes were heavy, but her mind was sharp. She parked near her old apartment building, the one she used before moving to the hills. Claire still lived 2 blocks away. She took a deep breath, grabbed the letter, and stepped out into the cold morning air. Claire's house looked exactly the same, neat, calm, elegant, the kind of house that looked untouched by time. Sandra rang the bell, her heart pounding. No answer. She rang again. Finally, the door opened. Claire stood there in a robe, her hair messy, eyes sleepy but alert when she saw who it was. "Sandra?" she said softly. "What on earth? It's 6 in the morning." Sandra held up the letter. "We need to talk." Claire froze, her expression shifting from surprise to unease. She opened the door wider. "Come in." Inside, the house smelled of coffee and jasmine candles. Everything was perfectly arranged, just like always. Sandra didn't sit. She stood near the window, watching the rain fade into mist. Claire closed the door behind her, her voice careful. "Where did you find that letter?" "It was waiting for me," Sandra said quietly. "And so was he." Claire's face went pale. "He? You mean Keanu?" Sandra interrupted. "He's back. He told me someone kept us apart. I didn't believe him until I saw this." She raised the letter slightly. "You wrote it." Claire didn't speak. She moved to the kitchen counter and poured herself a glass of water, her hands shaking slightly. "Sandra, you have to understand." "Understand what?" Sandra's voice trembled, not from weakness, but from years of buried pain. "That you destroyed the one thing that made me feel alive? That you lied to both of us for years?" Claire closed her eyes, her voice breaking. "I did what I had to. Back then, everything was falling apart. There were contracts, studios, people watching your every move. They said if you got involved with him, your career would be over. I thought I was protecting you." "Protecting me?" Sandra whispered. "You broke my heart. You made me believe he walked away without a word. Do you know how many nights I blame myself for that?" Claire wiped her eyes, her voice small. "I thought he would understand. I thought he'd stay silent for your sake. And he did. But I didn't expect him to disappear completely." Sandra's voice cracked. "He disappeared because you told him to." Claire didn't deny it. "I told him you were done, that you didn't want to see him again. I begged him to leave quietly before the press found out. He asked me 3 times if it was really what you wanted. I said yes. I lied, and he believed me." The words hit Sandra like a wave. She took a step back, trying to breathe. All those years, all that pain, built on one lie. "You had no right," she said, her voice shaking. "No right to decide for us." Claire's tears fell freely now. "I know. I've lived with that guilt every day. I tried to tell you later, but I didn't know how. Every time I saw you breaking on set, I wanted to tell the truth, but it was too late." The silence between them was sharp and heavy. Sandra looked at the letter again, then at Claire. "Why now?" she asked. "Why send this letter after all these years?" Claire's expression changed. Fear flickered behind her eyes. She hesitated before answering. "Because I'm being watched," Sandra frowned. "Watched? By who?" Claire looked toward the window, her voice trembling. "By the same people who told me to keep you apart." Sandra's confusion deepened. "What are you talking about?" "It wasn't just me," Claire whispered. "There were others involved. People with power. People who wanted control over both your careers. They said your relationship would ruin their plans. I thought it was only temporary. I thought they would let it go, but they never did." Sandra's stomach turned cold. "Who are they?" Claire opened her mouth to answer, but the sound of a car door slamming outside made them both jump. Claire's eyes widened. She ran to the window and peeked through the curtain. "They're here," she whispered. "Who?" Sandra asked again, her pulse racing. Claire turned to her, her face pale. "You need to leave now. They can't know you are here." "I'm not leaving you," Sandra said firmly. Claire grabbed her hand, desperate. "Please, Sandra, go to him." "He knows more than I do. He's been trying to expose them. He's been followed since he came back. If they find you here, they'll know you've reconnected." The fear in Claire's voice was real. Sandra hesitated, her mind torn between questions and instinct. Then a knock sounded on the door, slow, deliberate. Claire's grip tightened. "Through the back," she whispered. "Go!" Sandra moved quickly, heart pounding, slipping through the kitchen door and into the narrow alley behind the house. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with tension. She heard voices inside, low and firm, and Claire's trembling answers. Sandra kept walking, her footsteps soft against the wet ground until she reached her car. She drove away fast, her hands shaking. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen. She hesitated, then answered. "You shouldn't have gone there," Keanu's voice said quietly on the other end. She froze. "How do you know where I was?" "Because they followed you," he said. "And now? They know you're part of this again." "Who are they?" she asked, her voice breaking. "People who don't want the truth out," he replied, "and they'll do anything to stop it." For a moment there was only silence, broken by the faint sound of the sea in the background. "Meet me tonight," he said finally. "Same place." "We don't have much time." The line went dead. Sandra stared at her phone, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. The morning light had faded into gray clouds again, and she felt the weight of something larger than love or betrayal, a truth that had been buried for years, now clawing its way back into the light. As she drove toward the coast once more, she didn't realize that a black car had pulled out behind her, keeping its distance, following every turn she made. The hidden truth. The waves crashed louder that night, as if the ocean itself carried secrets too heavy to hold. Sandra drove along the dark coastal road again, her eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds. The same black car still followed her. Its headlights kept a steady distance, not too close, not too far. It was enough to make her chest tighten with fear. She pressed harder on the accelerator, the engine humming through the wet silence. Every turn of the road seemed to whisper that she was heading toward something irreversible. The lighthouse stood ahead, its light sweeping slowly across the sea. It looked different at night. Lonely, powerful, and almost alive. She parked behind a cluster of rocks, turned off the engine, and sat still, waiting. Her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. She could hear the waves hitting the cliffs below, steady and cold. For a long moment, she didn't move. Part of her wanted to turn around, go back and pretend none of this was real. But another part, stronger and quieter, knew that if she didn't face this now, she would carry the weight forever. A shadow moved near the lighthouse steps. Her breath caught. It was him. Keanu walked toward her slowly, his coat flapping against the wind. Even from a distance, she could sense something different in him. The calmness was still there, but now it carried something darker, a quiet awareness of danger. When he reached her, he didn't speak right away. His eyes scanned the empty road behind her before he finally opened the passenger door and sat down. "They followed you," he said softly. "I know," she whispered. "They've been behind me since I left Claire's house." His jaw tightened. "Did she tell you everything?" "Not everything," she replied. "She said people with power forced her to separate us. She said you were trying to expose them." He nodded slowly. "That's true." She turned toward him, her voice trembling. "Who are they, Keanu? Who could have that kind of control over both of us?" He looked at her for a moment, as if deciding how much to say. "People who own stories," he said finally. "People who build the images the world believes. Studios, investors, publicists, those who decide which truth the world sees and which one stays buried." Sandra frowned. "But why us?" "We weren't doing anything wrong." "We were too real," he said quietly. "They couldn't control it. They wanted your fame untouched, clean, perfect. And they didn't want me connected to anything that could distract from their narrative. They believed love was a weakness." His words cut through her like wind through glass. She remembered the nights they had shared, away from cameras, away from noise. They were quiet, simple, and real. But now, hearing how those moments had been turned into a target made her heart ache. "So they destroyed it," she whispered. "They tried to," he said, "but some truths refuse to die." She looked at him, searching for something beyond his calm. "And what about now? Why come back after all this time?" He leaned back, his eyes fixed on the distant sea. "Because I found something they didn't want anyone to see. Something that connects everything. The contracts, the letters, even Claire's silence." Her pulse quickened. "What did you find?" He reached into his coat and took out a small flash drive sealed in a plastic case. "This," he said, "proof. Recordings, messages, internal memos, everything that shows how they controlled not just us, but dozens of others. They've been manipulating careers for decades." Sandra stared at the drive, her breath shallow. "How did you get this?" "Someone inside helped me," he said. "A friend who used to work for one of their companies. He sent it to me 6 months ago, but he disappeared soon after." "I think they found him." Her stomach turned cold. "You mean he's gone?" Keanu said quietly. "No one has heard from him since." Silence filled the car. Only the rhythmic sound of the waves remained. Sandra's eyes moved to the flash drive again. "What's on it?" she asked. "Truth," he said. "The kind of truth that ends careers. But it also puts people in danger." She shook her head slowly. "So that's why they followed me. They think I have it?" "Yes," he said. "They know I came back. They know you saw Claire. They'll assume she gave you something." She looked out the window, watching the sea move under the moonlight. "What happens if we expose them?" He took a long breath. "Then the world changes. Maybe for a moment. Maybe forever. But we won't be the same." She turned to him again. "And if we stay silent?" He met her gaze, his eyes steady. "Then we become part of their lie." A moment passed between them, heavy and quiet. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence before a decision that could change everything. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then we don't stay silent." Keanu looked at her, and for the first time since he returned, she saw a faint light in his eyes, hope mixed with sorrow. He nodded slowly. "There's someone we can trust," he said. "A journalist. She's been investigating the same group. She can help us bring this out safely." "Where is she?" Sandra asked. "Not far," he said. "But she'll only meet at dawn. Near the old train station," she hesitated. "And until then?" "We stay here," he replied. "It's safer than the city." She leaned back in her seat, exhaustion finally catching up with her. The wind howled outside, carrying the smell of salt and rain. She closed her eyes, feeling a strange mix of fear and comfort. For years she had imagined this moment, seeing him again, hearing the truth. But she never expected it to come wrapped in danger. Still sitting beside him, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace, fragile but real. Keanu watched her quietly, his mind racing. He had waited so long for this chance to make things right. But deep down, he knew the storm they were stepping into would not spare them easily. Too many people had too much to lose. A sudden flash of light outside broke the silence. Headlights. Sandra's eyes opened instantly. Keanu turned toward the window. A dark SUV had stopped near the base of the hill. Its lights cut through the fog, steady and cold. "They found us," he said. Sandra's heartbeat quickened. "What do we do?" He started the car. "Hold on!" The tires screeched as he turned sharply, heading toward the narrow path leading away from the lighthouse. Behind them, the SUV's engine roared to life. The chase began. The road was slippery from the rain, twisting along the edge of the cliffs. One wrong turn and they'd be swallowed by the sea below. Keanu's hands were steady on the wheel, his focus absolute. Sandra clutched the seat, her eyes wide, every muscle tense. "They won't stop," she whispered. "Neither will we," he said. The SUV gained speed, its headlights flashing in the mirror. Sandra looked behind and saw two silhouettes inside. She couldn't see their faces, but she could feel their intent, cold and certain. A sudden curve appeared ahead. Keanu turned sharply, the tires skidding for a second before gripping again. The SUV followed too fast. It clipped the guardrail, sparks flying into the night. For a moment, Sandra thought they had escaped. But then another car appeared from the opposite direction, blocking the road. Keanu braked hard. the car spinning slightly before stopping near the cliff edge. The headlights from both vehicles trapped them in blinding light. He turned to Sandra. "When I say run, you run. Don't look back." "No," she said firmly. "I'm not leaving you." "You have to," he said, his voice low but urgent. "If they take me, they can't take you too. Promise me." Tears burned her eyes, but she nodded. He opened the glove compartment and took out the flash drive, pressing it into her hand. "Keep it safe, no matter what." The car doors opened behind the light. Two figures stepped out, wearing dark coats, moving with calm precision. One of them raised a hand, signaling to stop. Keanu stepped out slowly, shielding Sandra with his body. His voice was steady. "She has nothing to do with this." "You want me?" a voice answered from the dark. "We want both." The sound of a gun cocking echoed through the wind. Sandra's breath caught. Keanu turned slightly, eyes still on the figures. "Now!" he whispered. She hesitated for half a second, then pushed the door open and ran toward the rocks. The night air tore through her hair, her shoes slipping on the wet ground. Behind her, she heard shouting, then a single gunshot. The sound split the night like lightning. She stopped for an instant, her heart frozen. "Keanu!" she screamed. No answer. Only the sound of waves crashing below, louder than before. She kept running, tears streaming down her face, gripping the flash drive in her hand like it was her last piece of hope. Somewhere behind her, the world she once knew was collapsing, and somewhere in that darkness, she didn't know if he was still alive. The silence after the gunshot. The night had swallowed everything. The sound of the gunshot still echoed in Sandra's mind, looping endlessly as she ran along the rocky path. Her breath came in short bursts, her shoes slipping on the wet ground, her heart pounding so hard it drowned out the waves. Every step felt heavier than the last. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The flash drive pressed cold against her palm, reminding her that whatever just happened, she couldn't let it be for nothing. She reached a cluster of trees near the cliff's edge and crouched behind them, her body shaking. The rain had stopped, but her clothes were soaked, clinging to her skin. Her eyes searched the darkness, trying to see movement, light, anything that would tell her where Keanu was. There was nothing. Only silence broken by the distant crash of the sea. She pressed a hand against her mouth to stop herself from crying out his name again. If they were still out there, any sound could give her away. She waited for what felt like hours, but was only minutes. Finally, she heard engines, first one, then another. The cars were leaving. Their headlights swept across the road and disappeared into the distance. When the sound faded completely, she stood, her legs trembling. She took a hesitant step toward the lighthouse path, torn between fear and the desperate need to know. The smell of salt and smoke filled the air as she reached the place where the chase had ended. The road was scarred with tire marks. Shards of glass glittered under the weak light from the lighthouse beam. But there was no sign of him. Not his car, not his coat, nothing. Only silence and the empty wind. She walked closer to the cliff edge, her breath quickening. Below, the sea roared endlessly, black and merciless. She called his name softly once more. Her voice breaking. No answer came back. Her knees gave way, and she sank to the ground, her face buried in her hands. Everything around her felt unreal. The wind, the ocean, the cold. She had found him only to lose him again, and this time it felt final. She sat there until dawn painted the sky with dull gray light, her eyes hollow, her mind drifting between disbelief and denial. The flash drive still lay in her palm, and when the first ray of sunlight touched it, she remembered his words. Keep it safe, no matter what. She knew what she had to do. When morning came, she made her way to the old train station, the place Keanu had mentioned before everything went wrong. It was half abandoned now, the kind of place no one visited unless they had to. She entered quietly, her footsteps echoing through the empty hall. Pigeons fluttered above, their wings beating against the silence. She looked around until she saw someone sitting at a bench near the far end. A woman, mid-30s, dark coat, sharp eyes. She looked up as Sandra approached. "You're late," the woman said. Sandra froze. "You're the journalist, aren't you?" The woman nodded. "My name is Leah. Keanu told me about you." The mention of his name hit like a wave. Sandra swallowed hard. "He's gone," she whispered. Leah's expression didn't change, but her eyes softened slightly. I was afraid of that. They've been after him for weeks. Sandra hesitated before handing her the flash drive. He said you could help. Leah took it carefully, glancing around before tucking it inside her coat. If this is what he said it is, then it could expose everything. But they'll come after anyone connected to it. That includes you. I don't care, Sandra said quietly. I just want the truth out. Leah studied her for a moment, then nodded. Follow me. They left the station through a side door and walked toward a narrow street lined with old warehouses. Leah led her into one of them, a small space filled with papers, monitors, and a single laptop. The air smelled of dust and coffee. She locked the door behind them and motioned for Sandra to sit. He trusted you, Sandra said softly. He didn't have many people left to trust, Leah replied. When he came to me, he already knew he was being followed. He said if anything happened, I had to find you. Sandra's heart clenched. Why me? Because, Leah said, opening the laptop, you're the only one who still matters to him. The words hit harder than she expected. She looked down, her throat tight. Leah inserted the flash drive into the laptop and waited. Files appeared on the screen, dozens of them. Audio recordings, documents, photos, coded emails. Each one labeled with dates stretching back years. Leah clicked the first file. A voice filled the room. A man's voice, smooth but cold. Keep them apart. Her contract renewal depends on it. We can't risk headlines. Make it look like a personal choice. Sandra's breath caught. She knew that voice. It belonged to one of the executives from her old studio, the same man who had signed her biggest deal. Another voice followed. A woman's. And him? Discredit him quietly. A canceled project should do it. We'll bury it under production issues. By the time anyone asks, it'll be forgotten. Leah stopped the recording. Sandra sat frozen, the truth unraveling inside her like broken film. They controlled everything, she whispered. Our lives, our choices, even our silence. Leah nodded grimly. And not just yours. There are others in these files, actors, directors, journalists. People who were forced into silence or exile when they stopped obeying. Sandra looked at the screen again, anger and sorrow mixing in her chest. He risked everything to find this. Yes, Leah said quietly. And now it's up to us to make sure it doesn't die with him. They spent hours reading through the files. Each one was worse than the last. Evidence of bribes, threats, hidden payments. By the time the sun began to set, Sandra's eyes burned from exhaustion. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling. If we release this, she said, they'll destroy us. Leah closed the laptop. They'll try. But if we stay silent, they win. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Sandra reached into her pocket and pulled out the torn letter from Claire. I need to see her again, she said. She's part of this too. Maybe she can help us understand how far this goes. Leah frowned. That's dangerous. If they know you're still in touch, they'll come for both of you. They already have, Sandra replied. There's nothing left to lose. Leah sighed, then nodded. All right. But we move carefully. Tomorrow night, I'll come with you. Sandra agreed, though her heart felt heavy. She stayed at the warehouse that night, lying on an old couch while Leah worked quietly at her computer. The rain began again outside, soft and endless. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the way he had looked at her before telling her to run. She wondered if he was really gone. Deep down, something told her he wasn't. There was no proof, only a feeling, a quiet certainty that somehow, somewhere he was still fighting. As dawn approached, Leah finally shut down the laptop and turned off the light. The room sank into darkness. Sandra stared at the ceiling, whispering to herself. If you're out there, Keanu, I won't stop until I finish what you started. Outside, far from the warehouse, a man stood in the shadows of an alley, his coat dripping with rain. His face was hidden by the dim streetlight, but his eyes were open, tired, wounded, alive. He watched the warehouse door for a long moment before turning away and disappearing into the fog. The awakening, the morning was gray and still when Sandra woke up on the warehouse couch. Her head ached from restless sleep and her hands still trembled slightly. The faint hum of the computer filled the silence. Leah was already awake, sitting at the desk, eyes fixed on the screen. A dim lamp cast long shadows across the room. "You didn't sleep?" Sandra said softly. "I couldn't," Leah replied. "I found something last night." Sandra sat up, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "What is it?" Leah turned the laptop toward her. On the screen was a series of hidden folders inside the drive, encrypted and marked with random numbers. "These weren't visible before," Leah said. "I had to decrypt them manually. There's a video file inside. I think it's from Keanu." Sandra's breath caught. "Play it." Leah clicked the file. Static filled the screen at first. Then the image sharpened. Keanu appeared, sitting in a dimly lit room. His face was tired, bruised, but his eyes were calm. He looked straight at the camera. "If you're watching this, it means they found me. Or maybe they think they did. Either way, I don't have much time." Sandra covered her mouth, tears already forming. His voice carried the same quiet strength she remembered, the same warmth that once made her feel safe. "There are things you still don't know," he continued. "This isn't just about us. The group behind this. What they control goes beyond careers or headlines. They use influence to shape everything. Who rises, who disappears, what truth the world believes. I tried to stop them years ago, but they silenced me before I could speak. This time I won't let them." He paused, his eyes softening. "Sandra, if you're seeing this, please don't blame yourself. None of what happened was your fault. You once told me the hardest thing in life isn't losing someone, it's living with unfinished words. I never wanted us to end like that. But if there's one thing I learned, it's that silence only serves those who abuse it. Speak, even if your voice shakes." The video flickered, his voice breaking slightly. "Inside this drive, there's a list of names. People who helped them and people who tried to stop them. One of them is still on our side. You'll know who when you see the last file. Trust your heart." Then, as if sensing something outside the frame, he looked off screen, his tone urgent. "They're here. Keep it safe. Tell the truth. And whatever happens, don't stop." The screen went black. Sandra sat frozen, her tears silent. Leah closed the laptop slowly, her face pale. "He recorded that before the chase," she said. "He knew what was coming." Sandra wiped her eyes, her voice trembling. "He's alive. I can feel it. That video proves he planned this. He wanted them to think he was gone." Leah nodded slowly. "Then we use what he left us. We finish it." They opened the final folder on the drive. Inside was a document titled The Ledger. It listed dozens of names, executives, journalists, producers, and investors. Some were familiar, people Sandra had worked with for years. Others were strangers. Beside each name were coded notes, payments, and references to projects. Near the bottom, one name stood out: Claire Davenport. Sandra stared at it, disbelief washing over her. "Claire?" she whispered. Leah frowned. "Your manager?" "She said she was forced," Sandra said, shaking her head. "She said she was being watched." "Maybe both are true," Leah replied. "Maybe she tried to protect you and ended up trapped inside it." Sandra's chest tightened. She stood, pacing the room. "We need to find her. She might know where he is, or who's still on our side." Before Leah could respond, the warehouse lights flickered. A faint humming sound grew outside. Vehicles. They both froze. Leah moved to the window, pulling the curtain slightly. 2 black vans had stopped across the street. Men in dark coats stepped out, scanning the area. "They found us," Leah whispered. Sandra grabbed the laptop in the drive. "There's a back door, right?" "Yes," Leah said. "But we need to split. If they catch us together, it's over. I'll lead them away. You take the drive and find Claire." Sandra's voice shook. "I'm not leaving you. You have to," Leah said firmly. "You're the only one who can finish this. Go to the old marina. There's a boatkeeper named Thomas." Keanu trusted him. "He'll know what to do." Sandra hesitated. Her eyes filled with fear and gratitude. "Thank you. Go," Leah whispered. They moved fast. Leah grabbed a few papers while Sandra slipped out the back door into the narrow alley. The rain had started again, soft but steady. She ran, her footsteps splashing through puddles. Behind her, voices shouted. A door slammed open. Engines roared. She didn't look back. After what felt like forever, she reached the old marina, a stretch of forgotten docks near the edge of town. Boats rocked gently against the wooden posts, their lights dim in the fog. She found a small shack near the pier with a flickering lamp inside. A man sat at the table, smoking quietly. His beard was gray, his eyes sharp. "Tomas?" she asked. He looked up, studying her face. "You must be Sandra." Her heart skipped. "You know who I am?" He nodded. "He told me you'd come." "Keanu?" she whispered. Tomas stood slowly, his expression unreadable. "He was here 3 nights ago, hurt but alive. Said if you made it this far, I was to help you." Her eyes filled again. "Where is he now?" Thomas looked toward the open sea. "He went to meet someone. Said there was one last piece left. But he hasn't returned." Sandra stepped closer. "What piece?" Thomas hesitated, then pulled a small envelope from his coat. "He left this for you." She took it with trembling hands and opened it. Inside was a note written in his handwriting. "If you're reading this, you're stronger than they ever thought. The final proof is hidden where our story began. The Lighthouse. Go there at dawn, and don't come alone." The note ended there. No signature, just the faint mark of water that had blurred the ink. Sandra folded it carefully, her mind racing. "He's still fighting," she said quietly. "And so will I." Thomas nodded. "Then you'll need to be ready. They won't let you near that place again." She looked out at the fog-covered sea, the lighthouse barely visible in the distance. Its faint beam cut through the mist like a heartbeat, slow, steady, alive. She knew the final answers waited there, and maybe, just maybe, so did he. But far away, in a room filled with monitors and flickering screens, a man in a suit watched a live feed of her at the marina. He leaned forward, his voice cold and steady. "She's going back," he said. "Make sure she never leaves again." Where it all began, the sky was pale when dawn broke over the cliffs. Waves struck the rocks below with a rhythm that felt both eternal and fragile. Sandra stood near the old lighthouse, the wind pushing against her coat, the sea spray cold against her face. She had returned to where it all began, the place where she had first met him, where she had last seen him, and where now everything would finally end or begin again. The flash drive was still in her pocket, its weight both heavy and sacred. She thought of the note he left. "Come at dawn. And don't come alone." She wasn't alone anymore. Thomas stood beside her, silent but watchful, his presence like a quiet anchor against the storm of her thoughts. "Are you sure he'll come?" Thomas asked softly. She nodded. "He said he would. He always keeps his word." The light from the rising sun began to crawl across the cliffs, touching the broken railings and the old bench near the edge, the same one where she and Keanu once sat watching the horizon. Everything felt the same, yet different, as if time had bent back on itself. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the cold air, and whispered to herself, "Please be alive." Footsteps echoed behind her. She turned sharply, her heart leaping. Keanu stood there, his coat torn, a faint scar across his cheek, but alive. The light caught his face, and for a moment neither of them moved. They just looked at each other. Years of silence, pain, and love compressed into that single breath of recognition. He smiled faintly, the same quiet smile she had memorized long ago. "You made it," he said. Her voice trembled. "You're alive." "Barely," he said softly, stepping closer. "But alive enough." She wanted to speak, to ask 1,000 questions, but instead she stepped forward and hugged him tightly. He hesitated only for a moment before his arms wrapped around her, holding her like someone holding the last safe thing left in the world. The wind howled around them, but neither cared. After years apart, the silence between them finally felt like peace, not punishment. When they finally pulled back, his eyes searched hers. "You found the drive," she nodded. "And the truth." He looked away toward the sea. "Then you know how deep it goes." "Yes," she said. "And I know you planned this. The video, the files, everything." "I had to," he said quietly. "They were watching every move. I couldn't protect you if they knew I was alive." She shook her head. "You don't have to protect me anymore. We finished this together." He smiled again, tired but proud. "That's why I asked you to come. There's one last piece." He led her to the base of the lighthouse. Behind the old door, half buried under debris, was a metal box sealed with rust. He pulled it out and pried it open. Inside were several photographs, old contracts, and a sealed envelope marked with a name. Project Eden. "What's that?" Sandra asked. "Their core operation," Keanu said. "The evidence that connects all of it. The manipulation, the disappearances, the payoffs. This is what they killed for." She stared at the papers, her stomach tightening. "Then we end it. We take this to Leah." "Leah's gone," he said quietly. "They got to her last night." Her breath stopped. "No," he nodded, grief in his eyes. "Thomas told me this morning. She sent one last message before they reached her. She uploaded part of the data online, but it's not enough. We have to finish it." Sandra looked out at the ocean, her eyes burning. "They've taken everything from us. No more." Keanu placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we make sure they never take another voice." He took out a small device, a satellite transmitter, scratched and old. "Once I send this, the entire archive will go public. It'll hit every major outlet, every platform. They won't be able to bury it again." She looked at him, realizing what it meant. "And they'll come for you." "They already have," he said softly. "But if they come, let them find the truth first." She reached for his hand. "We'll do it together." He nodded once, his eyes never leaving hers. Then he pressed the button. The transmitter blinked red, then green. A soft beeping sound filled the air as the data began to send. The lighthouse lights spun slowly above them, casting gold over the cliffs. For a moment, it felt like the world held its breath. Then, from the distance, engines roared. Black vehicles appeared on the narrow road, speeding toward them. Thomas stepped forward, pulling out a small flare gun. "I'll slow them down," he said. "Finish the upload." Sandra's pulse raced. "Thomas, no, go," he said firmly. "This is what he trusted me for." Keanu and Sandra turned back to the transmitter. The progress bar moved slowly. 60%, 70, 80. Bullets cracked through the air, hitting the rocks nearby. Thomas fired the flare, the red light bursting into the sky, signaling something unseen. From the cliffs above, two fishermen's boats started their engines. Allies, silent protectors who had been waiting for the signal. Chaos erupted as the vehicles skidded to a halt. 90%, Keanu said. "Come on," Sandra whispered. The wind roared, dust and sea spray swirling around them. Keanu looked at her, a quiet smile crossing his face. Whatever happens now, they'll never silence it again. The transmitter beeped one final time, upload complete, and then everything exploded into sound, shouting, engines, movement. But none of it mattered. The truth was out. Keanu grabbed her hand. "We need to go!" They ran toward the side of the cliff where a narrow path led down to the boats. Thomas covered their retreat until the last possible moment, before vanishing into the smoke. As they reached the edge, Sandra turned back one last time, the lighthouse standing tall against the storm, its light sweeping over the chaos below. They climbed into the boat as bullets struck the rocks behind them. Keanu started the engine and they sped out into the open sea, the horizon glowing with the first real light of morning. For a long time, neither spoke. The ocean stretched endlessly ahead, calm now, almost forgiving. Sandra looked at him, her eyes full of both pain and peace. "What happens now?" she asked. He looked at the horizon. "We start over. Not from what they took, but from what we still have." She smiled faintly. "And what do we have?" He turned to her, his expression soft. "Truth. And time." She looked away toward the rising sun. The light touched the water, turning it gold. The air smelled of salt, of freedom, of something new beginning. She closed her eyes, whispering, "After years apart, we found our way back." He squeezed her hand gently. "Where it all began," he said. And as the lighthouse faded behind them, its final beam sweeping across the endless sea, they sailed toward a future unshaped by lies. Fragile, uncertain, but theirs.